I built the very PC that I'm using to edit this video for one purpose: to play Cyberpunk 2077. It was all the way back in 2019, the game was supposed to come out soon, and I eventually did what I'd set out to do, although I wasn't necessarily able to run the game very well. It all started when I saw that 48-minute gameplay reveal. I was instantly drawn into the neon lights and dark alleys of Night City, and it seemed like I wasn't alone. Over 20 million people have watched that very same video. At this point, I had never seen Blade Runner or Akira, or played any of the games in this video. This edgy urban aesthetic was brand new to me, and all I wanted to do was play this game. So why cyberpunk? Maybe it's because all the violence, corruption, and chaos is a distraction from the horrors in our own world. Or maybe it's just because it's pretty. Far enough into the future that we could still change things, but close enough to be relatable. Not every cyberpunk story is completely dark. Some are about finding hope, fighting back, doing the best you can with what you have. Others are about driving cool cars. Besides that first gameplay video that drew me in, I think the most memorable piece of 2077's marketing for me was that showcase they did with all the different vehicles you'd be able to drive. Not to pick favorites, but I've since realized that 2077 isn't really my type of game when it comes down to it, but I do owe it a great deal of credit for getting me interested in the genre. Not to worry though, because I managed to find something more up my alley in the year or two following. See, what I did really like about that one was soaking in the atmosphere, either by walking through its crowded streets or speeding down them in my latest flashy ride. Well, Cloudpunk is basically these two things combined, with a decent story thrown in for good measure. You play as a delivery driver in the crumbling city of Nivalis, equipped with nothing but your flying car and a digital dog companion. The game used to be entirely in third person, but at some point, right before I played it, they added first person to the mix, and boy was this the right choice. It's so much easier to immerse yourself in your new life and new job, grabbing a bite to eat and heading back to your apartment to rest before your next shift in first person. Most of your time in Cloudpunk will be spent on your own, driving through different sectors of the city, listening to the whir of your engines, and then finishing your deliveries on foot as the rain comes down. A very simple experience that may not captivate everyone as it did me. There's not much action here, but if you're all about atmosphere, listening to people's stories, and wondering about their lives as they walk past, then I think you'll enjoy this one. And now's the perfect time to jump into this world because the developers at Ion Lands are finishing up their next game very soon, Nivalis, which will have you running your own restaurant empire, growing ingredients, and making some friends and enemies along the way. As much as I adored Cloudpunk though, there is another game that takes the cake when it comes to cyberpunk vibes. In fact, one of the reasons I started this channel was to talk about the then upcoming game Stray. Slinking through alleyways, jumping between rooftops, poking your little nose into rundown shops and cluttered apartments. Stray lets you get up close and personal with all the stuff I love about this genre. And man, when I first walked into the slums, and especially when I arrived at Midtown, pure joy. That's because the game wants you to explore every nook and cranny. It's practically begging you to. These are such incredibly designed locations with little Easter eggs hidden all over the place and things you can interact with as a cat. Maybe the stealth sections weren't my favorite, but other than that, I couldn't think of anything to make the experience any better. I'd heard rumblings of this cyberpunk cat game floating around the internet, but that first official trailer blew me away. What can I say? I guess you can call me a sucker for video game hype. Sometimes it's fun to just dream for a bit and get carried away. Dangerous too, but just like cyberpunk, it can be equal parts dreamy and dark. I really want some sort of sequel to Stray, even just another game that takes place in this world, because it leaves me with so many questions, and honestly felt like home for the few hours that I lived within it. I'll admit, these past two examples have maybe been surprising to some people depending on if you're a regular around these parts or not. Definitely not your textbook examples of cyberpunk. So let's switch over to the dark side now and talk about Observer. I played the demo for this one somewhere in between my time with Cloudpunk and Stray, in a dark room, by myself. It was slightly terrifying, to say the least. You're a neural detective, an elite investigator sent by the corporate government to hack into the minds of the deceased to solve their murders. What I played was brutal and frightening, and definitely wasn't the pretty neon light version of cyberpunk that gets so much love. If you like searching through crime scenes, navigating twisting hallways, and aren't afraid to get a little abstract with some of the game's dream sequences, Observer could fill that void for you with some real dark stuff. Now, if after all this doom and gloom, you maybe want to get up and do something, put your money where your mouth is, and fight back against the system, there's always Ghostrunner. This is the most recent game I've played here, and it doesn't hold back. You don't really have time to soak in the atmosphere, to be quite honest, but it is still very pretty. As you climb up this giant tower, you learn of a world lost to the apocalypse, with the few remaining survivors forced to fight for limited resources. You don't seem to think this is very fair, so you grab your sword and set out to get some revenge. And it is tough. So much as looking in the wrong direction for a second will get you killed, but when you get into that flow, boy does it feel good. I suppose I should also mention the Mirror's Edge series here as another example of a cyberpunk parkour game. It does have a much more bright and sunny look, but both games share a lot of similar themes with Ghostrunner. While they're not the first games that come to mind when I think cyberpunk, they still fit here and are some pretty great titles too. Moving into the future, there are a few games that I'm particularly looking forward to. I already mentioned Nivalis, a slice of life sim where you can kinda kick back and do whatever you want. This one is supposed to be releasing in spring 2025, so you still have some time to play through Cloudpunk and familiarize yourself with the city before then. Next, we have Replaced, a retro-futuristic action platformer about an artificial intelligence trapped in a human body. Earlier this year, the developers released a big gameplay showcase video, and I am now super excited for this one. Great music, this lovely cinematic pixel style, and hopefully a compelling story too. Last is a little survival horror game called Samurai Unicorn. In a futuristic version of Australia, you play as a young detective fighting to do what's right, help the struggling people break free of the Dream Eater's grip. There seems to be a lot of factions at play here, all vying for control over the city, plus different hubs to explore in between missions to flesh out the world, and of course, lots of horror action gameplay. And that just about does it. Let me know what your favorite cyberpunk games are, and I hope you have a lovely day.